try and nail filming a quick video, which I've never achieved in the history of anything. Hello and welcome, my name is Nadia and I make things on this channel, primarily knitting, but some other crafts as well. This is the last end of year type video that I'll make, one of a grand total of 2, but this is probably the last end of year video that you'll watch because it's so horrendously late in the year. As the title probably says, this is my reflections on the previous year of knitting and what I'd like to do moving forward, the changes I'd like to make, and sort of like goals for the year. It's very, very philosophical, very demure, very, you know, we're being mindful, we're thinking about the future, which is very nice. Getting straight into it with, I think the most important goal for this year is I'd really like to make things that I'm actually gonna wear. I think if I look back at everything that I made in 2024 and, you know, filming a very long video about it will really help you reflect on it. I didn't end up wearing a lot of the pieces, and they haven't become sort of staples for me. And I think a lot of my staples are actually from previous years that I've knit things. So something's gone wrong there in whatever I've been doing. And yeah, I'm just not producing things that I am really reaching for in my wardrobe. And I'd really like that to change. So I think it got better towards the latter half of the year with, you know, some of the more like out there designer dupe kind of style pieces. But in the first half of the year, I think I was just gravitating towards things that would get yarn out of stash. And while that is really important to me, I really want to be able to sort of make things that gets the yarn out of stash and then also become something that I wear all the time. I think, yeah, it's quite simply just the biggest goal. And to do that, I think I'd really just like to analyze the things that I look at in, you know, in like on the high street when I'm looking at ready to wear pieces, whether they be designer or, you know, whatever, and just look at the things that I really enjoy in those pieces and that I actually think will translate well to my wardrobe and try and emulate that rather than just sort of picking a pattern or, you know, trying to let the yarn tell me what it wants to be. I don't know, I think I knit a lot of stockinette things or a lot of like big oversized jumpers because that's what the yarn says that it needs to be based on, you know, just like the easiest way for me to get it out of stash. And I think if I actually just thought more, maybe even less in like sweaters quantities, you know, like I have a lot of sweaters quantities that I have in mind for certain things. Hello. But I think if I actually look at a lot of the things that I like on the high street, there's a lot of like mismatched yarn. You know, there's like striped pieces, which would use like half a sweater's quantity mixed together. And I think it's thinking sort of more creatively about your stash and actually breaking up sweaters quantities, you know, and just not using the whole thing for a jumper just because that's the most convenient thing. Because I think in the end, that'll give me a piece that I enjoy more. And that's also another thing I think I need to knit a lot more of because I love stripes. Like I really love stripes. I own a lot of striped pieces. I just think stripes look really great in an outfit. I gravitate towards outfits that include stripes, but I haven't actually knit that many of them. And I think that's kind of strange. And then also maybe a few more just really plain neutrals that are elevated and that I'll wear all the time. So kind of contradictory in that I'm saying that I want to sort of do things that are less boring, but then at the same time I want more neutrals. But I think I very rarely knit, you know, just a grey jumper or just a beige jumper or just a black jumper because I don't think that that's going to be the most engaging next project. But I do think I will wear those a lot. So yeah, I definitely think some neutrals are on the cards mixed in with some more, you know, different creative interpretations of things that I see in ready to wear that I think would fit in my wardrobe. if that makes sense. I definitely knit a lot of cardigans last year, and I would like to continue knitting cardigans. I think they're pretty useful, pretty versatile. I have to say, I do think I wear jumpers more. I think it kind of is an easier thing to just sort of chuck on. But yeah, I don't think making the cardigans will stop in 2025. I'm pretty sure like my last 4 projects have been cardigans. And I think my next 3-4 that I planned are also cardigans. The purling is kind of annoying, but I've been doing a lot more stitch things. I will say I don't love stitch things because it just means that you can't rip it out as easily. It kind of really cements that piece as like that thing that it's going to be. Yeah, I think steeking is a good way to sort of get more cardigans out and have more pieces worked flat without actually working them flat. Speaking of steeking and just generally different techniques, I think I've reached an impasse with kind of my knitting skills, you know, where I've really, I think, perfected a lot of the basic skills of knitting a full jumper or garment, picking up stitches, working button bands, getting gauge, stuff like that. I think I'm proficient now, and I think it's time for me to sort of introduce some more interesting techniques, and just generally like look at some more like advanced styles of knitwear. I think that's kind of the thing that will keep me engaged in the hobby whilst also creating wearable pieces at the same time. This is a really tough balance. I don't want to, you know, just create a bunch of really interesting pieces that I won't wear because they're too ornate or they're just not basic enough. But I do want to keep developing the skill and learn some new things. I'm definitely not, when you first start knitting and you're at that stage where it's so exciting and you're learning a new skill and all of these like synapses and neurons are firing and you're like, oh yes, just obsessed with it. I think that's a really exciting stage to be in, and I'm definitely not in that stage anymore. It's definitely taken more of a backseat in sort of my hobby life, which there's nothing wrong with. I think, you know, I was unhealthily obsessed with knitting for a long time, and now it's more casual, which I think is probably good. But I have lost a lot of like the fun of sort of discovering a new skill. So I would definitely like to work on some new techniques this year. And I've said it before, but I'd really love to expand into sort of like crochet or different sort of fiber art styles, whilst still keeping in mind things that I think will be wearable and I think that are very cool. So in one of my videos, I mentioned that I was really obsessed with filet crochet. I think that's definitely a technique that I'd love to learn, get under my belt. Yeah, just experiment with putting in garments. I think other sort of, you know, like making more experimental pieces like bags, or you know, I've never knitted something and then felted it. I think that could be quite interesting. Like more in-depth garment constructions. I really love the look of the things like, you know, the middling cardigan or the Lanark sweater, where you're sort of knitting things not in the traditional way and you're learning a new technique. I think that's really interesting to me. Definitely color work. I'd love to do more color work. I'm already, you know, like I've done a lot of intarsia and I've done a fair bit of Fair Isle, and I don't think that they're difficult techniques to learn. But I do think that whole charting element and sort of like drawing pictures with your knitting is something that I'd really like to get more into, because I think it really keeps you engaged. And then is also a more creative way of sort of getting through different sort of non like full sweater quantities of stash. I'm really happy to sort of spend more time on making garments, but have them be more intricate and more interesting. I think you can kind of see it's a theme that's been running through my plans for a while, but yeah, I'd really like to just sort of ramp that up. Never really made a full garment in brioche, though I think it is just kind of the kind of thing that will just annoy me, and I don't think is that particularly complicated. But maybe doing sort of like increases and decreases in brioche I think would be interesting. Oh, I've never made a skirt or a dress or anything like that, and I think that's a fun challenge. I tend to not gravitate towards skirts just because, I don't know, I have the feeling that if you're using a wool and you're going to be sitting down on it and there's all of that friction near the sort of hips and the butt area, then it will wear the wool pretty quickly, or, you know, quite unevenly, and will maybe like stretch out the garment. That's the kind of the idea that I have in my head, but Maybe that's not the case, and maybe I just need to experiment with like different styles of making things up. A long time ago, I had this idea to dupe this particular tartan skirt through knitting, and create sort of like a, as you would in weaving, I guess, but create a like tartan pattern through stranded colorwork and intarsia and stuff like that, and you know, knit something quite at a bulky weight, but at a very small gauge to have a very dense fabric that I could then sew into a skirt. I'd definitely like to revisit that idea, or, you know, just something that's a little bit less commonplace than, you know, just another jumper. Yeah, and then just experimenting with more interesting shapes. Like, I think I already covered this, but you know, like having strange like belts and strange cutouts and things, and just, you know, really sort of experimenting with the form of knitting, again, rather than just picking, you know, your bog standard drop down shoulder jumper, round neck, etc., etc. There will always be a place for that in my wardrobe, but I think yeah, it's time that I kind of branch out. So at the same time, I'm talking about wearability, but I'm also talking about being more experimental. Maybe just a bit of both. Third goal is quite simply just to get some things that I've started knitting out of my work in progress pile and get into finished format. Currently, I think I only have 2. I generally usually just have some kind of work in progress lying around, and it does kind of hang over me. And I tend to only work on the project that I have out. So maybe sort of switching to more monogamous style knitting. Not fully monogamous. I like having a little, you know, easy project around, an accessory, something like that I can just grab and go. But yeah, having a restrained number of projects that I knit in certain settings, I think will actually mean that I move forward on things a lot quicker. I will quickly go through some of the things that I've started knitting. This is a Oslo or Stockholm, I always get them confused. A petite knit jumper. So this is just a regular drop shoulder jumper that I'm knitting on, I don't have any of the needles in here. I think it's like 3.75 or 3.5 millimeter needles. So it's a really small gauge, which is why I have barely worked on this. But when I do end up working on it, it is actually really enjoyable to work up. So I should get back on it. And it's made with a hand-dyed sort of fingering weight yarn by Zakami Yarns, which I always think is funny because it sounds like my 2 dogs' names, Zuko and Okami. Zakami. This is their natural fluff fingering in the Boomy colorway, and I'm just about to join Under the Arm, which is a good point, because then I could just knit for stockinette for forever, and I think that would be quite enjoyable. I am, I think, committed to alternating skeins, so that does make it slightly more complex. But yeah, I'd love to actually wear this, just get it out from, you know, hanging in my brain space and stressing me out. So that's something I'd like to finish this year. Don't even know why I'm bothering to show this, because it's gonna look like absolutely nothing on camera. This is my Sana cardigan by Rebecca Clow, that I used just a black yarn and a black mohair to create this sort of like really gothic style. I stopped working on this because I'm at the point where I need to do the 3 needle bind off, which I'd never done before. I think I've done it. I don't know if I've done the real thing, but I think I've done it. I'm not so scared about doing that step anymore. But I did also commit to doing a scallop in ribbing, in 1x1 ribbing using short rows, and I have yet to sort of sit down with a swatch and figure out how to do that. So that's why this project has been sitting. This is like I've done basically all of the knitting on this. So and I spent, you know, a long time doing this sort of very intricate lace that you can barely see because it's in a black mohair. So yeah, it would be good to get this into a garment that I can actually wear. So speaking of other crafts and things that I'd like to sort of diversify away from knitting, I would really love to get back into sewing this year. If you didn't know, I learned to sew before I learned to knit. I think I learned to knit in about 2022. But I learned to sew. I actually got a sewing machine at Christmas 2019 as a very kind gift from my mum. And from that point, and then I didn't really touch it for a couple of months until obviously like March 2020 rolls around and we're all stuck indoors. And I'm like, oh, I have this new toy and this new thing to sort of throw myself into. So that was kind of like a happy accident. And I did a lot of sewing. I was really, really quite proficient in sewing. I thankfully, when I started, I didn't actually use too many patterns. And I just kind of started, like trying to take patterns from my own clothes, and I was sort of like laying them out and trying to pattern draft myself. And I was really sort of quite experimental with it. And I think that gave me a confidence later on in sewing when following patterns that I knew how to do some of these things just from learning and discovering them myself. For the past 2 years though, I've been very behind on my sewing just because of the way the house is set up. I don't have currently a sort of dedicated space, and because of that, it means that I need to put away my sewing machine every time that I use it. So I'll be on the dining table, but then I will need the dining table for something, and so I'll need to put it away. And that is just such a blocker that not having those things out means that I don't tend to reach for my sewing. And it's also, it's a very different hobby from knitting, right? Like it's quite, you've really got to, like put all your attention in it, and spend quite a dedicated amount of time without a lot of breaks. And I think I get the best things done when I'm spending like whole weekends or at least like a whole day just sewing. And that's, whereas knitting, you can kind of just plug in and plug out of your life however much time you have. So I've definitely dropped the sewing ball quite a bit, but I have lots of really beautiful fabric that I'd love to use. Funnily enough, Making Cassie on YouTube made a video, I think 3 years ago, where she bought some striped denim fabric to make some dungarees. And I've had that fabric in my stash to make dungarees for that amount of time. Like I went out and bought a striped, it's not just pinstripe, it's like, is it railroad? That striped denim. I spent a lot of money in Merchant & Mills, and I got enough to make some dungarees. And I've had that in my stash for that long. And what I need to do is I need to make a toile, because I've never sewn dungarees before, and it's just been stopping me before I can sort of go and make that pair of dungarees. So I'd like to make that this year. I just get some of my beautiful fabrics out of stash. I've thrifted a lot. I have some really nice pieces. I used to be so experimental with my sewing, and I was making all of these crazy things. And I was learning really, really interesting techniques. So I think, I'd love to get back into that. I have already committed to sew quite a bit this year, and I'll tell you why. So I'm getting married in September. I have been engaged for a long time now. So I've been engaged for a long time, to the point where I forget that I'm engaged and that I actually need to get married one day. For a variety of reasons, we never set a date. I think we bought a house around the same time, and there was a lot going on with that. And I just think financially we were just not really in a place where we could commit to spending a lot of money on a wedding. I personally didn't quite feel ready. It's a big thing, getting married. And I think there's so much pressure on it that I think I just kind of kept putting it off because I didn't want to get it wrong. But we've committed. We're getting married in September, and we have a date, we have a venue, we have a lot of things planned. I'm currently working on the invitations, but I have been looking for a wedding dress for a while, and I was absolutely 100% adamant that I wouldn't sew my own wedding dress for a variety of reasons. I didn't want the stress. I didn't want that feeling of like less than, that you've made your own dress, and so it's maybe less professional or less shabby. I wanted to sort of put my faith in a professional and be like, they've got it. and not have to feel in any way insecure on the day. I'm probably not explaining it very well, but I think there was just a part of me that, you know, one of the other things that put me off is when I said I was going to get married, people were, you know, everyone was like, oh, you're going to make your dress, you're going to make your dress. And I was like, no, why are you assuming that? Like, I can buy a dress. Like, and I think it's just that kind of like that assumption that because you make clothes, that you're going to make every important piece of clothing. And I didn't want like a DIY I wanted to feel really special. Having said that, I've scoured the internet. In November, I went to Copenhagen, and whilst I was there, I took the opportunity to book a private appointment with Cicely Banson, who's one of my favorite designers. And with the idea that I was going to try on a dress that I was potentially going to buy for the wedding. And I tried on a couple of dresses, and there was just nothing there that was really, you know, that I did fall in love with one particular dress, but they didn't have the size anymore, and it was completely sold out. So I didn't find anything there. And then I've since been to Madrid, and I've tried on a bunch of wedding dresses at like a wedding dress shop, and, you know, did the whole like bougie experience where they like bring out that I did the whole thing. And having seen those two things in person, I think that there's nothing really, it doesn't scare me. Like, I feel like the quality of the dresses is not so inconceivably high that I couldn't achieve something similar. I'm just generally quite disappointed with the fabrics. I think even at the very high end, there's a lot of use of polyester. There's a lot of like not so nice fabrics. And I think I'm just a bit of a control freak, let's be honest. I think I just wanted to control too many of the elements of it, and knowing more about garment making, it means that like I think you just become really picky. So I'm going to make my dress is what what I'm trying to say. I've started. I have a while, but it's not a long while. I've started, and I am also committed to filming, not the whole thing, but like a lot of the process. Yes, all of that to say that I will be filming as much of my wedding dress making process as possible, and I'm very much inspired by from Carly B, who's been making her own wedding dress on YouTube recently, and her videos are amazing. Like, they're very high production value, and you know, they're really well thought out, and she's very, very experienced, and I am not any of those things, so it will not be of the same kind of quality, but I do think it's an interesting thing to look at, and I'm excited. Like, I think with sewing, like, all of the fun parts of sewing are all of those, at least in my opinion anyway, all of those like really high couture finishes that are, you know, making ball gowns and designing things that are, you know, visually interesting and that are complex, and that are like using 3D shapes, and like that's the kind of thing in sewing that I think is like really fun to do. And how often do you get to do it in your like day-to-day life? Like, make a ball gown. It's not necessarily a ball gown, but you know, a big fancy dress. Like, I don't think that gets to happen very often. So I will bring you along, but please be nice, because I'm definitely not at the same level as from Cardi B. Because I've started actually drafting the dress, I will make a video very soon about the design of it, and like how I sort of the inspiration, the pieces that I gathered, and then sort of my plan moving forward. And then from then on, I'll film more of myself making the dress. Should be fun, and we'll definitely get some use out of my sewing machine. Although I do kind of want to use this as an excuse to buy a nicer sewing machine. Like, I don't know, I've had my eye on a Genome. Is that how you say it? A Genome for a while, and this feels like a really good justification to purchase one of those. Probably that won't leave a lot of time for a lot more complex sewing projects for the rest of the year. Maybe after I get back after September, I think will be the time that I'll be doing a lot more of my sewing projects from then on. But that's going to be like a main focus of this year. So I think the knitting will take a bit of a backseat, but it's, you know, it's all for a good cause. finally some quick and small other little goals. I would really love to become more social this year with my knitting. And I'm happy to report that I've actually made progress on this already, which is great. Because I live in Kildare, there's not a great representation in terms of like knit nights and things like that. I think maybe in more UK cities it's more prevalent, but I haven't found a knitting group that is sort of easy for me to sort of join. I know there's one in our local library, but it meets on Wednesday mornings, which is not super convenient for somebody who works full time. So I will maybe try and go along and sort of sub some hours here and there. But I did kind of want to find something that was maybe a bit that I could attend more regularly and was maybe a bit more convenient. It's actually less convenient because it's in Dublin, but I have started attending a knit night. I've been once and I'm going to go again this week, but it's a good start. I was very nervous going into it. I think this has been a very, very solo hobby for me so far. And you know, it's just been me working on my stuff and then since last year filming it and sharing it with people, but I don't really have many people in my life that I can talk to about knitting you know, regularly, and that I can like share all of the things that I'm making and get feedback on. And so, you know, outside of an internet relationship. So I'm really excited to sort of meet more people. I think also, you know, my close friends, pretty much all of them have left the country, or I met in a different country. So I don't have that many friends left in Ireland. It's the kind of place where a lot of people in my age group tend to leave for greener pastures elsewhere. I have two really good friends that are Spanish and they moved back to beautiful Spain with, you know, a much better cost of living and standard of living and just weather. So I think a lot of the friendships that I made in my early 20s have now sort of evolved and moved away, and I don't get to see people more frequently. So that is definitely a goal that I have this year, is to sort of form new friendships based on hobbies, but just generally just forming new friendships, I think is a good thing. Another small little goal that I had is that I really wanted to finally do a test knit. I've applied for countless test knits in the past, you know, with all of the regular folk that post test knits, but I've never been successful. I think maybe there was a time on Knitting Internet where it was a lot easier to get selected, but now I just feel like it's so saturated that unless you've tested before or unless you have quite a big following, it can be really hard. Or like, you know, you're like really dedicated and you apply to like every single test knit. I don't want that goal to be sort of in you know, butting heads with my other goal of making wearable projects. I don't necessarily want to test things that I wouldn't normally wear, and so that kind of limits down the options. But yeah, I'd like to finally do a test knit this year. I've made progress on this where I'm testing some mittens, and I've cast those on now, and I'm getting to sort of dip my toes in the experience. But this is a very small test, and I think there's a part of me that's like, oh, I just love to be in like one of those like massive tester groups and like chatting to people. I don't know if there's any benefit other than you don't pay for the pattern and you get it in advance, but it's like one of those things that loads of people have done and I haven't done, so I'd like to do it too. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. What did I say I wanted to do? I wanted to make more wearable things. I wanted to learn some new techniques. I wanted to be more social. I wanted to test things, which is also kind of being more social. And I wanted to, integrate sewing more into sort of my hobbies, which I will naturally do by making my own wedding dress. If that sounds interesting to you, then stick around, because I'm sure I'll be talking about a lot of these things over the coming years. And yeah, I've really only just sort of gotten into the swing of this YouTube thing. And, you know, a lot of the videos that I was making previously are really, you know, molded by videos that people in the community already make. And I'm really interested to sort of develop that, and, you know, make videos that are maybe more true to what I want to talk about, and that don't just fit in the mold of like knitting podcast this, or, you know, what I made in 2024 that. Like, I think those are very classic style videos, and I think, you know, I feel like I could spend more time thinking of video ideas, if that makes sense. Prior to 2024, I'd never edited a video in my life or filmed anything in my life. I'd love to upgrade all of my setup. Like, I film on a GoPro, that's great, but you know, I'm not always happy with the quality of the image or the quality of the sound, or anyway, it's really, really boring for most people. But yeah, I'm excited to sort of, now that I've, I don't know, done the basics, I'd like to develop that skill a bit more. I feel like every time I've done something that's outside of the mold, like talk about designer dupes, which I haven't seen a lot of people do before, or you know, add styling content to videos, that's been really well received, and it's done quite well. So I think leaning into those things that make me more unique in the market will help. I don't know. It's like Brooke Willow, when she started posting her different format podcasts, everyone really responded well to that. So yeah, I think that's in my future. I'm just really excited to be here. I hope you're excited to be here. And if there's anything that you want to see more from me, if you have, I don't know, like any suggestions or anything that you'd like me to do more or less of, then I'm always open to hearing it. And yeah, thanks so much for watching so far. And yeah, see you in the rest of 2025, I guess. Okay, talk to you soon. Bye. Cammy, could you come here, please? You going behind? Could you go behind? Good girl. See, look at that. Have you got a beautiful tail in the shot?